Welcome to Live at the Blue Box. We are continuing B2C2, our very own microscopic Comic-Con.
Teeny tiny.
They don't get smaller than this.
Oh, it's so small.
We have a very special guest. We actually have two, but you don't count as a guest. You do.
Oh, yay.
But you're both named Scott. That's what's really weird.
Oh, that's going to be so confusing.
I don't think so, unless you guys try to imitate each other. So, Scott,
Yeah.
why don't you introduce yourself, and then Scott, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Scott Sammons, and I'm just a general geek nerd type that likes things like this.
Scott has been a guest on our podcast before, and he does a little gaming, so it's very appropriate that he's on this panel because I'm going to fall into quicksand quickly with you, Scott. So, and our special guest is.
Is this working? Hello?
Yep.
Okay, I'm good. And I am Scott Casper, and I am one of 10,000 people on the planet who have their own webcomic, and that's one of the things that I do, and that's what I'm here for tonight.
Excellent. Well, more than that, because you do have your own webcomic, but you actually have a niche that you fulfill.
A teeny tiny sub-niche. Okay, because I'm also big into role-playing games. That's what my webcomic is about. But then I publish my own role-playing game that is just for people who are interested in role-playing Golden Age comic book characters. So it's very teeny tiny.
I'm sorry, we got to trade mics. Is that better? Okay.
Huh. Okay. Where were we?
Go ahead. So you say that again, and I'll edit that part. What you specifically do? You said you do role-playing games.
I write a webcomic that's about role-playing games, and the role-playing games that I make, I'm self-publish my own, and it's about specifically playing Golden Age comic books. So it's very teeny tiny sub-niche market.
Really?
The Hideouts and Hoodlums game is specifically for emulating comic books from the late 1930s, early 1940s.
Oh my gosh!
So there's like 50 people on the planet that thinks it's great, and everyone else thinks,
You know what? I think your percentage of people that think it's great is incredibly high in this room. At this table, you are at 100%. Scott and I both just lit up. In fact, I think we have a guy date because that sounds awesome.
All right, I'll bring it to next time.
Oh my
I'll
gosh,
run it.
Please. You know what? Chris Mao, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. He's going to bring his role-playing game. Now, you created this game?
I did.
Awesome. It is specifically, you role-play Golden Age comic books. He said only about 50 people care. I told him the percentage in this room is much higher. Because, wow.
Well, earlier than that, specifically what it covers is like the very first version that I wrote was just for emulating Superman in 1938. So the list of powers that you can do in the game were only things that Superman did in the first year of Action Comics.
Wow.
That's how specific it gets.
Yeah, wow.
So no actual flight.
I added that in later.
Okay.
But yeah, a superhero in the game could leap, and you would have leap at various levels that got you higher and higher in the air. But fly was like a 5th level power because Superman would be so high in level before he could do something like that.
And what is the name of this game?
Hideouts and Hoodlums.
Hideouts and Hoodlums. Wow. Now, this is a game that you created.
Right.
So it's not like you're piggybacking off of another thing. You've
Well,
created
actually,
the game.
that's not entirely true.
See, I'm a novice at understanding this. I've played. I'm just a novice at understanding this part of it. So
All right.
the more you can inform, the better.
Let's step back and talk about what just allude to the webcomic, and then we'll get back to that later.
I want to hear about the webcomic, too. So many things.
The webcomic and the game both have to do with Dungeons and Dragons. And I'll have to qualify that later, too. I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, loved the game, but there was just an awful lot of killing involved, and I wanted something that was a little more friendly and just roughing up people and taking them to jail, just like the comic books that I grew up reading.
Right.
Because I loved the game, but I didn't really grow up reading fantasy fiction, so it wasn't really gelling with me in that sense.
Yeah.
So I wanted my own version. I know that there's been lots of superhero role-playing games throughout the years, and I could name a whole bunch of them right now, but none of them were really close to the experience of playing Dungeons & Dragons, where you're going into a lair, beating everybody up, and taking their loot.
Yeah, it's basically just beating up and loot drops. That's because I played one when I first played D&D, and that's all it was. You got your superpowers, and you're like, this is cool, and then it didn't have that experience. And for me, it's about story, and you get a good DM, and it's about the story,
Yeah,
So
you could do a lot of that too, but at the heart of the game, underneath all the story that you add on top of it, that's like the cream on the top of your coffee, and then at the ground at the bottom.
You're talking my language. You understand that? Okay.
The ground is beating people up and taking their stuff.
Yeah.
And you can't ever get away from that, because that's what all the mechanics of the game are based on.
Yeah, that's what I found a little boring about that. It's okay. It needs a little more, something more.
All right. So what? And you're not going to get far away from that in my game.
Okay.
Because I specifically didn't want to get away from those coffee grounds at the bottom of the cup. I wanted that feel.
I like it. I don't want the cup to be full of grounds. Make sense?
Sure, I can buy that. So, where was I? I totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I completely interrupt, and I'm going to start talking about Planet of the Apes in a second, because that's how I think. So you were saying that yours, you kind of rooted it there, which is similar to D&D.
Oh, right, okay. So
Anytime, Scott.
The thing where it comes into D&D is that I wanted to make my own game, and around 1999-2000, this is when Dungeons & Dragons came out with the open game license.
Yes.
All right, this is something that you would know about, because this opened up a whole world of self-publishing to everyone, where you could make your own game, you could use their mechanics, as long as you met some qualifications. Like, for instance, I'm not supposed to be mentioning that my game is like Dungeons & Dragons, so contractually I'd have to say that it's not like Dungeons & Dragons, but it's actually very similar in some ways.
But if you like it, then you'll like mine.
Yeah, that's what I should have said.
Yeah.
I'm actually terrible at meeting that qualification.
You
but
could just say it's swimming in the same pool.
That's a good one. I like that. Okay. So I've been swimming in the same pool for a while now.
Okay.
And so I'm able to use the same coffee grounds to continue that metaphor, but I've built up all this other game around it.
Yeah. Now, okay, this will lead to the webcomic. Is that what Greyhawk is? Because when I met you, it was at a little con at a library, at Schaumburg Public Library, and we were talking about this a little bit, and I'd never heard of Greyhawk, and then that day I told you it exploded. All of a sudden I heard you and one of the guys that started it, and this whole thing. But I also noticed there were people at the con that were really kind of freaking out to meet you, and there was like, I have this issue of Greyhawk and this, and they were so excited. Is that
true.
what that is? Is Greyhawk kind of swimming in the same pool, but it was kind of an early incarnation? Because it's not a D&D game.
It is almost the earliest, and it's not a game, but the game setting.
Okay,
so
that's what it is. Okay.
Yes. When Dungeons & Dragons was first made back in the 70s, there were just a couple of two guys that were responsible for making, Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, and they had their home games that they ran while they were developing the game.
Sure.
Gary Gygax's campaign was the world of Greyhawk, and this is what he ran in his basement for his friends, including the guy that was interviewed on the podcast that you told me about, Jim Ward.
So this is the one he was doing with his kids and his friends and building on it every day and
exactly
and building it up.
Is that the one that came in the box? Remember the Gary Gygax Dungeons and Dragons box that was different than the game that because I had all the advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but then I got this box for Christmas.
You probably did get one of the basic set boxes.
Really basic.
The Errol Otis artwork on the cover that was really
that's
freaky.
The one.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that what that is?
No, that's not.
Was it in the pool? Please tell me it had some of the coffee grounds spilled in it.
You're so close. I'll give it to you.
Hey, I take that as a win.
As a matter of fact, for a long time, he didn't want his home campaign to have anything to do with the official Dungeons and Dragons line. This was like personal to him.
Interesting.
And he also was worried about spoilers for his players, so he didn't want, even when he eventually did come out with published material for the World of Greyhawk setting, then it was always changed so that it wasn't exactly what the original home campaign was. And it was 1980, several years after D&D came out, when the Greyhawk Folio came out. 83 when the first Greyhawk box set came out. But they weren't actually complete games that you could play. They were just material that you could add to your home campaign.
Okay.
So extra story settings and maybe like a few plot points to get you moving into your own campaign.
Stuff like that.
See, because my knowledge was fairly limited. I loved playing it. I just didn't, I was in that time, we're talking like early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I got to play it a few times. I met up with some friends. We played a little bit, but I didn't quite understand. Like, I remember we'd get sets, and they didn't match, so I didn't know there was worlds. Ravenclaw or something?
Ravenloft would be another campaign setting.
Okay, I had that one, and I'd have one thing from them, and they didn't match up, so I didn't get that experience.
Yeah, I was just refreshing on the history of Greyhawk here earlier, and it started as just a basic dungeon crawl under a castle. And it just kept expanding, and eventually there was like, there's a city nearby, and then, here's this whole land around it. Because the players,
and those would be like expansions you'd explore out from where you were.
Like the players kept wanting more and more, and you kept having to fill in more details, and this is the magic, these are the deities in this area. So that's why it was so many, and I was looking at the list, and there's just dozens and dozens of these campaigns that would be released with. In this part of the story, and it would have like a timeline, and they would do it in real time as time was going on. So, last year in Greyhawk they did this, and we're moving forward.
This is blowing my mind. I want to play it so badly.
Campaign settings are basically just all optional. You can always play Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game without having a campaign setting. For years, I'd never used a campaign setting. I would just run the published modules, the adventure modules that they sold, and they weren't connected in any kind of shared world.
That was the experience I had.
All right. But then eventually I realized that you could connect them and put them in a world, and it opened up whole new vistas of the game.
Yeah.
And actually, Hideouts and Hoodlums is sort of like just a campaign that's added on. Just like Greyhawk is an added-on world, like Forgotten Realms you may have heard of, and Ravenloft that you mentioned. So the reason why, and this comes back to earlier, you were talking about why they were so excited. Greyhawk is not only one of the earliest, but it's also kind of the Charlie Brown of campaign settings, because it's been so kicked around.
Kick the football, or
it's the football.
It's the football.
It got support for a few years, and then there was, instead of getting into the whole history of how Gary Gygax was outed from the company, they decided to kill his campaign setting, and then they promoted these other ones like Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance, and they never... I can't say that. They never for long came back to Greyhawk to promote it.
Okay.
So the fans have always been rabid in supporting it. There's a huge fan-based community online for Greyhawk.
I know that after looking, after talking to you, and I typed it in on Google, and I'm like, whoa, this is a whole thing that it eluded me.
And one of the things that's so great about it is because they did stop publishing stuff about it, so you could just take it and run with it, what little was available, and you had to fill out all the rest yourself, because there wasn't the feeling with other campaign settings that you could just wait a year and they'll come out with a whole other box set that's going to tell you what's going on in this part of the world, so why should I bother making it?
So I got a question about this, and I want to get to your webcomic and this.
Okay.
But I have a question about this. Like you say, okay, so they come out with a new set and they're talking about here's what's happening in this part of the world. Does that affect the other part? What I mean by that is I don't play World of Warcraft. I don't play that stuff. But I understand that, like, they'll come out with an expansion, they'll change it, and it can affect the entire game. So you can either choose to, okay, I'm going to do this Rat King thing, or I'm not. And if I choose to do the Rat King thing, everything I experienced is now going to be changed if I try to go back. Does that happen here, or is that too hard to do? Or
It could, but it's really
so
based
it's not
on
a common thing.
Yeah, it's really up to the individual gaming group because
Okay.
you can do anything you want with your home game, and nothing that's published affects your home campaign unless you want it to.
Interesting.
So
it's so fascinating. Oh man.
And that's kind of why Dungeons and Dragons hasn't grown in the way that it has since the early '80s, because by the time you own a few things, you already have everything that you need.
And you can just do your thing.
Yeah, if you're a fan, you can keep collecting, but you don't have to. You could get one book and some dice, and you're already good to go. And that's
fantastic.
It's the power of the game.
Yeah. I mean, I know the first time I played it, I was so my head exploded like it is right now. I was so excited to continue trying it and figuring things out. It really is possibly the greatest game ever.
It was
Forget baseball.
It should be the national pastime.
You know, this should be the national pastime. It's the national pastime of the Blue Box Cafe. Let's say that.
Right.
We are a nation of one
is.
now.
There's, everyone is playing Dungeons and Dragons when they're online, even if they don't know it, because so much of the game mechanics is inherent in all video games that you're playing. Even if you're playing Candy Crush, you're basically leveling up.
Right.
And you're facing greater challenges as you go up in level, and that's the basic mechanic of Dungeons and Dragons. And everything grows out of that. Everything from 1974 on is built on Dungeons and Dragons. It's a singularity moment.
Yeah, Battleship didn't do that. So you, Scott, I'm pointing across the Scotts.
I knew this would be confusing.
Yeah, it is. So Scott, Beard Scott, how's that? You like that?
Okay.
Yeah, but now they'll know who's talking, or I'll know who's talking. So Beard Scott, you play Magic.
Yes.
And you, non-Beard Scott, have you delved into that? Because that really is just fight. But I've just started playing it with Edward, who's on This Week in Geek with us, playing it again. I hadn't played it in a long time. And I've noticed a huge evolution in how that works even.
The Magic?
Yeah, it's very different. Now, is that just boiling it down to the grounds, or...
Well,
I'm working that metaphor.
I can't speak of that as a fan, unfortunately.
It is more of the boiled down to the grounds because you don't have a character that levels up. You may have a deck that becomes your pet deck.
Okay.
And you play that as you go along,
But do you get
can
attached
trade
to the
out
characters within the game? I remember because I know with what we're talking about, Scott, non-Beard Scott, is
I'm back in.
What we have talked about here. I know that I had my characters that I rolled, and I remember their names now. 35 years later, and I remember one guy that I rolled almost all 18s on, and the DM said, "Can't do that." I rolled them in front of you. It was awesome. So do you, when you play Magic, do you get that way? If you have your deck, do you go like, I know that these are the characters, this is how I'm doing it? Or is it more about just the attributes?
It's the characters, because the company Wizards of the Coast has really pushed, in years past to give the game faces.
Okay.
Each setting, because they come out with settings every year, and they go to different different worlds for different environments.
So there are different worlds that you're playing with.
Yeah.
Now, did you know this?
I have
You're just
friends
not a
that
fan.
play Magic, and I know one of them goes around the world and wins tournaments all the time and makes a lot of money out of it. But I have a personal grudge against the game because I would run Dungeons and Dragons, and my players would be playing Magic on the side, and it was so distracting.
Oh no!
I'm running my game here, people.
Well, that was how Magic was created. As Richard Garfield, who was a math guy, was challenged to create a game that could be played in between convention panels and could be small and portable.
Oh,
with a fantasy theme.
That's how that came about.
Yeah,
and that's
it's something
why it would be
that you
played
could
while
stick
you're
in your
playing
pocket.
D&D. If
It's
you're
easy
not
and
rolling
it's
and doing your thing,
seductively
you can do
easy.
it on the site. Oh,
So that's what they came up with. There's something you could stick in your pocket.
So
You have
we
a
could
deck of
feed
cards.
my ADD during podcast to play a little Magic while we do that.
Sure, I can start bringing some in.
Interesting. I like it. Can they do a Golden Age superhero deck?
Someone,
cool.
Someone might be able to do that.
No, I want to see. I want to play it as D&D. That just seems not D&D in the pool of D&D.
In the pool of D&D.
So
correct.
Greyhawk Comics.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
Okay.
Back to what we were originally going to talk about.
Yes, there's two parts to this. Before you were doing the webcomics, you were writing fiction about it, correct?
I was. I've the Greyhawk community that I mentioned earlier. I've been a part of for a very long time, since like '97.
Okay.
That's not even the beginning of it, but that's just when I jumped on board. And there was several of us that wrote our own fan fiction related to the game. And I had written a whole novella about the original Greyhawk campaign, which was based around Castle Greyhawk, and it was something that the people that read that sort of thing really liked. And then it just sort of went away, and I didn't do anything else with it. But there was this other guy who did his own web comic about the world of Greyhawk, Mike Bridges from down south Illinois, did this WOG comic book, and it was really great. And I had noticed around 2005 that he was producing less and less, and I talked to him about it, and he was just running out of ideas because he was doing one-shot joke comics about it.
Okay.
So I asked him, I approached him about a collaboration. I knew he liked my novella, and I asked, would you be willing to adapt that into a webcomic? And he actually agreed, which is the start of it all.
So you write it and he illustrates, or he's kind of involved in the writing also, or?
He is responsible for most of the look of it. I will write a script for each page and submit it to him based on the earlier novella, and then he turns it around and shows it to me, usually the way that I envision it in my head in the start, but sometimes he'll really surprise me, and it'll be so much better than I ever imagined it. And that's really the best part of collaborating on a webcomic.
Is this it? Is this it here I've pulled up?
Yes, that is it. The
Castle Greyhawk. Okay.
webcomic.
Yeah, this, looking at a few of these here, it looks like a combination of a few paragraphs of prose and then the comic panels that, help to set the scene here. I mean, the last one has, are these our heroes then? They're in a pit, and they're in a bad shape right here. And,
This is page 84 of the webcomic. This is chapter 3 of the story, and these are the original characters from the Greyhawk campaign setting. So Tensor was the character of Gary Gygax's son. The character Rag is Gary backwards. That's the character that Gary was playing in his own game.
Fun.
And Robilar was a young friend of theirs, Rob Kuntz, and Tarek is Terry Kuntz's character. So these are all based on those original characters, and as close as I can get based on what we've been able to research what the original campaign was like. There's a lot of people that have been interviewing the original players over the years and trying to get a feel for what it was like to be able to sit at that table back in 73, 74 and feel what it was like.
Are these guys like the Beatles to you?
Yeah, I could see that as an apt comparison. Yeah. I don't even necessarily like all the original Greyhawk campaign players, but together they built something that was greater than the sum of their parts.
Everyone's got a Revolution number 9, so... See, there's a little Beatles joke for you.
Sweet.
Well, man, so you do the webcomic. Now, is this... I know it's a weird question, but is this popular? Because I know your novella was definitely popular, because I saw that guy totally, fanboying about you.
He wasn't doing that about my novella. He may never have read it, but just the fact that it was about Greyhawk.
He did say, I have your original novella.
Oh, well, I don't remember him saying that, but that's awesome that he did.
Yeah, he said that's why he was like, I couldn't believe you're here. I have the original novella. And I went, that's when I was like, wait, I thought he did webcomics. And then you started talking to him about Greyhawk. But yeah, he had it. He said he had a copy.
I should have got that guy's name.
You know what? Maybe he'll be listening to this. He'll be like, he's the one guy who's like searching iTunes for your name. And
Whoever
like,
said that, contact me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you in my gaming group.
Oh, he would probably pass out. I think Scott would pass out too. He's getting very excited over there. Beard
Sweet.
Scott, I mean.
I'm looking at the comic here, and this looks like a lot of fun here. You know, it's kind of the classic. They're exploring the castle, and somebody's fallen into a pit, and they're hurt now, and they're trying to rally the warrior and the healer to get them out of the pit and get them healed.
Sure.
But there's also story on top of it that you would like too. Like Robilar is the character that several people don't trust because he's kind of a bandit, and
Okay.
the others are more about working together, and they don't know if he's really with them or not. So there's
That's the stuff I like. Is that, and I was like that when it would be added as an attribute. So even if the player felt like they were going to be like, I'm a good guy, I can't do this. Yeah, but you're always a plus whatever, no matter what you roll. So there's always the chance that you're going to steal from them, or you're going to. I always thought that was a great thing because when you play video games, you don't really have that. You have to make the decision. And I have a hard time with open world games of making the decision to be the bad guy. Here, I have no problem being the bad guy, but on the games, I do.
and there's not really bad guys in this story other than the monsters that they fight, and we
Right.
don't even know if they're bad guys.
It's you're not the hero.
Okay, right.
You're a utility character, but you
And-
might have attributes that are not what you want.
And I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about.
Okay.
But I just wanted to point out that in the Greyhawk campaign, most of the characters are neutral in alignment, if you get that reference.
Yeah, I totally do.
Okay, so they're not necessarily good guys. There's not a lot of bad guys, but everyone's kind of self-motivated and trying to work together as best they can. And that's going to be a thread that's going to follow through to the end of this. It's, like I said, it's already written, so I know how it ends, and we'll see how long it takes us to get there.
I was going to ask, do you have, at the pace you're at, do you know an end game? Are you like, what, this is going to be about 3 years of work, or?
Well, we've been at it for a long time because it's, he's got a full-time job, so I get a page from him every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And at that rate, we've been at this for about 3 years now. So it's going to be a long time until we get to the end of that novella at this rate. Plus, I keep adding more material, too. So that's really slowing it down. And if we ever did get to the end and he was willing to keep going, I actually know what I want to do for a chapter afterwards. So
That's awesome.
I'm going to be extremely old by the time that we ever get this done.
You just gotta pull a Jar Jar Martin and not tell anybody how it ends, but set things in motion. And do you like him? Do you like what he does?
Actually, I'm not a big
Not a
fan
big
of
fan?
that. Like I said, I don't read a lot of fantasy fiction.
Oh,
so.
I was gonna throw a couple of them out there at you because there's a couple that I'm interested in that I think are great in the fantasy realm. But if you're not a big reader of it, let's forget that. We have a question, actually. Yes.
Ask away.
This wasn't a question, this was commentary. As long as you were talking about how George R. R. Martin never tells anybody how anything ends, he actually told HBO how he wants Game of Thrones to end in case he dies before he finishes writing the books.
Right. So, Scott, are you
Well, that's
planning on
thoughtful.
doing that, or?
HBO has not contacted me yet. I keep waiting. It's not happening.
You know what? We're putting the good vibes out there. Let's hope that happens.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not going to let it drag on this way.
Oh, well.
1 minute a week. The Greyhawk story.
That would be something. That would be
Now I'm
like,
thinking I want to do that. That sounds awesome.
you remember when Cartoon Network did that Star Wars cartoon that was
Yes.
just like 5-minute installments.
It was-
That's what
Right,
the Castle
Andy
Greyhawk
Tarkovsky's Clone
animated
Wars.
show.
Yeah, when they did
Right,
that-
that's astounding
It
animation
was. And
and
you remember,
storytelling.
that was before we had our DVR, so you really had to catch it, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's a 5-minute thing. Oh, don't go to the bathroom right now. I gotta watch. It's so great.
That would be an amazing Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Just 5 minutes of running it. You wouldn't even know what was going on if you just caught one because you'd see some guys you don't know running into a room and fighting an ogre.
And then
you
it's
say-
over, and you're like, what? Oh, I
But that
love
would
it.
be exactly what D&D is like.
I love it. We might have to develop that. I like that idea. Okay. I'm trying to think what else we have, because this is also interesting to me. My mind is just spinning. Scott, did you have questions?
No, I'm just looking. I've been looking
you did
at
mention
the
the text
comic.
pieces. The text pieces were inspired by, and I want to throw it out there for Mark Oakley of Canada did a comic book called Thieves and Kings, which was hugely inspirational to me. That includes sequential art and long text pieces throughout the comic book. So when I started doing this, that was exactly what I wanted to do on the blog. I wanted there to be text that was integral to reading the story afterwards in pictures.
Right. I like this because I've read some other web comics that kind of put this together. Do that same thing, and even some graphic novels like Watchmen. Has it has the graphic.
It has the
but then it
text
has those
elements to it.
like those 3 or 4 pages of text in there that just give.
Yeah, you're really
enough-
doing a disservice if you skip them.
Yeah, they add so much texture to it. So and I'm laughing at this particular one here because it's the aftermath of a small battle, and the magic user has just found a new spell and used it successfully for the first time, it looks like. And one of the others asked, "So how did you know to cast this without catching us in the blast radius?" And the magic user's like, intuition. His first time using it, he just figures, whatever, we'll try it.
That's funny.
I love that scene, and I waited so long to get to it because as soon as I got to chapter 3, I knew that was coming, and I knew exactly that I needed to have that one skip beat panel towards the end there for the pacing.
Yeah,
And
right. You were just waiting for that breath there, right?
Yep. I knew that was going to happen, and I just was
Now-
so glad that I had that payoff.
Have you written dialogue like scripting before? I mean, you're obviously because writing comics and writing, prose, very different. It's a different skill set. Writing scripts can be a very different skill set than even writing comic books. Have you ever? I mean, you're obviously doing 2 of those. Have you ever written scripts? Have you ever tried your hand at something like that?
I have not written a script, no. This is the closest to that I've done. And in fact, I've never written directions to a comic book before, so it was
So
great.
this is a new experience. And
and I'm hoping I get more experience or more chances to do this too.
Well, it's obviously working, so you can do it. So that's
Yay.
a real positive. Did you ever read? This is another comic that's been around forever, but and you may hate it because everything I've mentioned you've gone. Knights of the Round Table.
I love Knights of the Round Table. Except you're talking about Knights of the Dinner Table, right?
Knights of the Dinner Table.
Okay, I knew exactly what you meant when you
Yes,
said
you
it.
did. You know what? You've watched me enough here that you know I'm like a Mad Libs. You got to fill in the blanks, and I filled it in wrong usually. So, yeah, Knights of the Dinner Table. I met him.
Jolly Blackburn?
Yeah, I met him 2 years ago at C2E2, and had a great conversation with that guy, and haven't seen him since. And I've thought, man, if I run into him, I want to get him on a show because he was so.
It's a wonderful man. You should go to Gary Con. He's there every year.
We just had the podcast that we mentioned that had
Jim Ward.
Yes, Jim Ward on. It is Mad Libs. All right, now give me an adjective. Okay, that podcast is 80s Reboot Overdrive, and one of the co-hosts on there just went to GaryCon and was posting some pictures, and I thought, what a dork I am. I'm looking at it, all these guys sitting around a table with their boards and their dice, and I'm like, that looks like an awesome weekend!
It's really an experience going there and seeing the people that are our celebrities as role players. And we went to C2E2 yesterday, and we saw TV stars, and that was exciting. But then to go to GaryCon, you see like the Dave Megery, who made the Dungeon board game back in the 70s, and just meeting him is so exciting. It's like meeting a movie star.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I dork out about people that nobody cares about but me, but man, I'm the same way. That sounds really cool. So our guy that writes Knights of the Dinner Table is usually up there?
Yeah, he works for Kenzer & Company. They're the ones that put out that comic book, and they always have a very big presence at GaryCon. They're very big supporters of all the old school cons like that.
Well, now it's a must to go to because I would love to get him on again. He was really interesting. He did I only have one issue that I picked up because he did the Yellow Submarine cover with all of the characters from that play D&D as the Beatles in it. Once
Yeah,
again, Beatles reference. And
every
I loved
cover
it.
is some kind of pop culture reference joke.
Yeah, and that one was just great when I saw it. I was like, oh, how do I not buy this?
And they've been doing it for so long. I wish that I could be so successful.
Well, and what's crazy is when you read it, there's a lot of text. There's a lot. I mean, it's dense, and it seems like there's multiple storylines going on. It's just there's so much in it. Yet it was fascinating.
Exactly. When I used to collect comic books, and I don't buy as many as I used to, but I always felt that after like 4 or 5 years, a creator usually runs out of steam and starts repeating stories.
Sure.
But with Knights of the Dinner Table, it's not just Jolly Blackburn doing it, but he's got a team of writers that are all working together on it, and their collaboration always keeps things so fresh and exciting. They have kind of cheated by expanding the cast of characters exponentially over the years, but that's just added complexity to it.
I'm okay with that.
You've got at least 3 different gaming groups. No, at least 4 that I can think of that the comic book follows, and then the interactions of those groups of players as they meet at conventions and compete against each other.
So fun, man. So fun. You know what? I need to spend some time doing this, Martha. I need to bend time so I have more time for this. So, once again, I'm going to go to Beard Scott. Do you have any other questions, or are we about done, or what do you think?
No, I think we're about done here.
So how cool is Knights at the Dinner Table?
Yeah, I'm pulling that
Oh,
up.
you pull it up over
I'm pulling that up here now, and it's
Sorry,
a lot of
Teresa,
inside,
you've lost him now.
a lot of inside baseball stuff here, but I know just enough that I'm at least getting a good chuckle out of some of the ones that a lot of the people. Around it. I read a couple of other webcomics. I've read one for several years. It's a group doing it. The current one is called Darths and Droids.
Okay.
And the conceit of it is that it's a group of friends that are role playing the Star Wars movies.
Okay.
1 through 6. And
I think I've seen that.
Previously they had done the Lord of the Rings movies. So, the basis of fantasy role-playing.
Sure.
But they took on the story as if it was their campaign. And, it's just a lot of fun because, they'll point out flaws with the story and plot holes and things like, why didn't the Eagles just drop the ring in the volcano? That kind of thing. But they're currently doing Star Wars. They just finished Empire Strikes Back, and they did it 1 through 6.
And every panel is a screen capture?
They're doing screen captures from the films.
I have seen that, yes.
Yeah, they're doing screen captures of the films. So that's one of my weekly reads for webcomics.
They're funny guys.
So, Scott, I want you to give the website so people can find this, because I know I want to go home and check it out.
For my webcomic, that would be castlegreyhawk.blogspot.com.
Let's say that again. There's a lot of noise in here.
All right. castlegreyhawk.blogspot.com.
Excellent. And anything else you want to plug? Any other ways people can find you? Or do you do conventions? Is there
only local ones so far, because I don't make a lot of money. So if I were to start buying table space at big conventions, I'd lose money really fast.
Yeah, right.
So I'm just doing the small convention scene right now, and we'll see where I go from there.
All right. Well, very good.
And Hideouts and Hoodlums is a little harder to find because it's got a longer URL that I can never remember. So just Google it and you'll find it.
And I know Chris would love to have you run a game here of that.
Sweet.
So let's definitely do that. Scott, thank you. Beard Scott, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for your beard.
And non-Beard Scott, thank you so much. This was really, really great. I'm so glad we got to interview you a little more extensively here. And thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to B2C2. Thank you, Blue Box. This was a blast. Have a great night, everybody.